I think Muslims and Christians around the world have changed their views of each other quite dramatically in, say, the last decade. It isn't just the tragedy of 9/11 that was an important factor, but in addition, the experience of globalization itself is very important. You have people interacting in ways that 50 years ago simply didn't happen. Part of the real change of the last, say, couple of decades is that Muslim-Christian relations used to either be broad civilizational or individual matters of an individual Christian and an individual Muslim meeting together. Nowadays, one of the most important areas of Muslim-Christian relations is inter-community dialogue and inter-community interaction, and this makes a big difference. One of the lessons that I've learned in working in Muslim-Christian relations now for at least 2 or 3 decades and teaching about Islam in the United States for now half a century um, is that what it means to talk about interfaith dialogue has changed dramatically in the last half century. I like to say that one of my major tasks is to bring an end to Muslim-Christian dialogue. And when I say that, what I mean is that the phrase Muslim-Christian dialogue implies that Muslims are on one side of the table and Christians are on the other side of the table, and you have two groups, two separate, clearly identifiable groups that are talking to each other. On the basis of my own experience in working in this general area, what I've discovered is that the real dialogue, the two different bodies, are not identifiable as Muslim on one side and Christian on the other. Instead, what you have are the people who express their religious experience in open, inclusive, and pluralist terms, and people who express their religious experience in exclusivist and isolationist terms. So that there are many of my Muslim colleagues that I feel I share their religious experience in a way.
My name is Becky Hurwitz, and I live in New York. I live in Brooklyn. With most of my time, I work in technology, and I work at the sort of intersection of social justice and tech, which is working with activists to help them figure out how to use technology to make their work more efficient or more effective. I think it's very easy for for us as people to assume all sorts of things about other people's motives and lives, and I think that there's just a lack of exposure to different kinds of people, and the ease with which we're able to and willing to accept stories that we're told about other people is um, is part of the problem. I think if you live your life in New York and you never leave New York, then you're apt to believe the little things that you hear about people living in other places, whether it's the middle of this country or whether it's some other country, right? If all you have is a few limited media channels and they're all saying similar things, you just never have a chance to like break out of that. I do think though that the Arab Spring was helpful in at least giving new. I mean, maybe again it's just stereotypes, but at least giving new archetypes, maybe is a better term for this, to Americans about who people from the Middle East might be and what they might want, and you can have an image of you can have a belief about what somebody else is or what they're motivated by, and that could color everything that you understand about why they're acting, right? So I'm sure that you could have a stereotype of an American or of somebody from the Middle East and say, oh look, but this person totally fits this model. You know, like here's this American and they walk in and they're egotistical and they're super loud and like they don't understand any other languages, and I don't know what else you might say. And then it's easy to convince yourself that all of the other things that you believe about Americans are also true. So I think when we assume that we understand somebody, we're all making mistakes. I think people with the higher ground are people who realize that they can't assume these things and they ought to meet people and actually know them. And I think also, I think these stereotypes are also made by our governments, right? Like people who are really invested in ideology and in proving that one ideology is correct and another is not are the same people who are creating these stereotypes and telling us that because somebody acts a certain way, that means it's wrong. So, so I don't know about on like the large scale, but I think we talked about this a little bit. So when I was in Cairo when I was in Cairo in March. One of the things that was really exciting to me was that everybody was agitating for change, right? And so students in universities were agitating to get the board members to turn over, and new professors, and taxi cab drivers were rallying in Tahrir and for higher wages, and like just everybody was agitating for little bits of change. And I think that if we looked at that micro level, that we would find that we have extreme amounts in common, like that all those little changes are what we all want.